Let's see if you can pass the test. How many TVs do you have in your home right now? When I start asking that question to my students, it's anywhere from 1 to 5. Now that doesn't count screens like, iPads and those kinds of things where you can stream things, but just televisions. How do we get to a point in this country where we had 5 televisions? Let's talk about that. Welcome to Freaking History, and we are going to talk about the culture after 1945 in U.S. history. Now remember, if you want a 3, a 4, or a 5 on your APUSH, AP World, or AP Euro exam, I'm the guy to see. After World War II and all of the folks coming home, this began a lot of building of homes, and when that happened, this is when the flourishing middle class begins. With money comes toys. Television became a part and a staple in middle class societies during that time, and it started to expand into homes where homes had one television that they could watch. Big step up from radio. So the media is changing from this radio media, which is still there and still relevant, but into television. So this is where I Love Lucy, Father Knows Best, Leave It to Beaver. They started making situational comedies, and they started doing quiz shows and trying to hold the attention. It also led to advanced advertising during this time. And you know what always makes me laugh is the Lucy episode where she was doing the cough syrup and she ends up and gets more intoxicated as she does take after take for that commercial. One of the other big changes was music. And see, the coolest thing is I grew up at a time when rock and roll really was at its height. And I always knew where the music came from. And when I asked my students kind of, where their music, and they kind of look at me like, how do you know this? Or why are you asking us this? And so, if you think about music, right? And during this time period, there's a blending of music. Because in the 1940s, it's still kind of, orchestra type of music. But then in the 50s, it starts to turn. Buddy Holly, Bill Haley and the Comets. And when you take those guys, right, that rockabilly, and then you actually take the true American music that the African Americans made so relevant, which is jazz and the blues, and then you blend those together, you've got rock and roll, and it's a game changer in society. Then we get Elvis. Elvis eventually leads to the British invasion and the Beatles. The Beatles and the Beach Boys are battling it back and forth. The Rolling Stones want their piece. And then we're hitting the late 70s where flower power is hitting and music is turned on its head. To Led Zeppelin, to Kiss in the 70s, to the punk rock bands of the 80s, Sid Vicious, hair bands, into Gen X, that's the Van Halens, the Poisons, and then into that harder metal like Metallica, Ronnie James Dio, the Scorpions. And because of that evolution of music and the rock and roll during this time period, this is when the disconnect becomes between teenagers and parents. And that's when the rub starts to really show that eventually is going to show these teenagers that they're going to start pulling from society and the status quo, and they're going to take advantage of that affluent middle class upbringing that they had, because these boomers are going to turn into the flower children of the 1960s. But we're not there yet. But now you know your freaking history. Peace.